Great turnout. All right, gang, we're going to kick off here momentarily. I will tell you throughout this, in fact, maybe to just start us off, if you in the chat box just drop in, like if there's something specific that you were really hoping that we could cover today, that you specifically came here looking for, or hope that we cover, drop it in the chat box. I've got that up in front of me. Obviously, I've got some prepared content for us to give you some perspective on what we can expect from our flagship program, Boot Camp. But I see some familiar faces, some staples of this community, and so how to find 10K plus events. Beautiful, Joe. That's perfect. That's a great example. Stuff that you really hope. I'm going to let a couple more people here in. That's popping up on my side. How to get started. Love it, Jim. This is a great place. We're definitely going to get into it. We're building this community for people who are wanting to break in or are trying to understand, what is this? How do you do it? How do you do it at a high level? But then we also, and we've got a number of real seasoned pros that are in this community and that are actually on this call who are just always looking to beat on their craft. How do we continue to go to the next level? So maybe you're a speaker right now and you've got pretty good deal flow, and you want to increase your fee, you want to take your impact, your stage presence to the next level. How do you stand out on a virtual stage? Great question, Tim. Isn't that one of the big challenges? Definitely something that we can chat about, something that I had to work through during the pandemic in the last 2 years. I felt like initially I had very large limiting beliefs around my ability to be compelling and create an exceptional experience virtually compared to what I thought was possible in the real world, in real life. So that's absolutely something we can cover. Eric, where are you going to get your best stories and content? Yeah, that's going to be a great question. The longer you do this, right, and the need to continue to reinvent and stay fresh and bring new perspective to the marketplace, how do we keep finding new stories, new case studies, fresh research to keep ourselves sharp? Love that. All right, I think we've got just about everybody. I'm going to let a few more folks in. And we're going to jump this thing off. So for those of you who I have not had a chance to meet yet, my name is Seth Mattison. I'm one of the 4 partners at Three Ring Circus, and I'm so pumped to help kick off our first inside look of 2022. And I know we've got a number of familiar faces that are joining, which is great. There is a major community aspect to this that we are attempting to try to create to help raise all of us up to a new place of performance and delivery and ultimately impact on the world. For those of you who I have not had a chance to meet, unlike some of my partners, and maybe you've had a chance to spend time and maybe be coached by Josh or Pete Sheehan or Ryan Estes, unlike Josh, I did not build multiple businesses before I went into and came into the world of speaking. I actually started out in the field doing research, qualitative and quantitative research for a management consulting firm, understanding change and transformation from a leadership perspective, from a people perspective, an alignment perspective culturally inside of an organization. And in the early and mid 2000s, one of the trends that was bubbling up was, of course, the conversation around generations, specifically millennials were starting to flood the workplace. And while they weren't specifically being called millennials by our clients, it was sort of that age-old challenge and frustration with quote-unquote young people that they would lament. And of course, when you identify a pain in the marketplace, there's always an opportunity there for a service or a business. And so as I was doing the field research and then also simultaneously looking at the data and studying other authors in the space, I discovered that there were 2 best-selling authors that also happened to live. I'm originally from Minnesota. In Minnesota, their names were David Stillman and Lynn Lancaster, some of the original thought leaders in the generational dynamics and theory space. They wrote a bestseller back in 2002. And I reached out to them and I started to build and foster a relationship with them and actually ended up apprenticing for them and then joining them full time. We worked together for almost 5 years. And I think it's an interesting yet unique entry and on-ramp into the world of professional speaking. A lot of times we think we need to start on our own, but the truth is one of the challenges as individual speakers that we face is your ability to scale your practice. The idea is I'm only making money if I'm personally out there speaking. So how do I overcome that challenge? And one of the ways that you can do that is to bring other junior experts and researchers onto your platform, to teach them your curriculum, let them start to go out and speak at maybe some of those lower fees. And so that's what happened with David and Lynn. They were at all sorts of demand at price points that, was cheaper than what they were going out for. And it gave me an opportunity to step onto their platform, learn their content, their body of research, and really start to understand the craft, the art of professional speaking and interacting with and across our different sales channels, particularly the bureau channel. And it was a beautiful place to cut my teeth and learn the business. After 5 years, they sold the practice, and I pivoted my brand beyond and sort of away from thinking exclusively about generational theory. And I started looking at larger future of work trends. What I discovered when we really distilled down the generational work was that in studying youth, what we're really doing is we're just getting clues about where the world is moving next. It's really just a subversive way to think and talk about change. Youth give us clues about where we go next. And so that made sense to the marketplace, that pivot. I didn't go from generational theory to being an innovation speaker or generational theory into being a sales speaker. There was a logical story I could tell to the marketplace. And since then now, it's been almost 10 years under this brand of the future of work. And everything that we do really is about one thing: helping leaders prepare for the future of work. And then the pandemic hit, almost 24 months ago. And my business, like maybe some of you on this call, many of our colleagues, my business got absolutely rocked. The first 4 or 5 weeks I watched as close to 75% of my projected revenue for the year evaporated, overnight, with no end in sight, no one really knowing when that recovery would happen. And I found myself in a very dark place, a place to try to reinvent and figure out where my business would go. This studio that I'm sitting in today, it didn't exist at that point. We delivered maybe a half a dozen virtual programs. And in that, what pulled me through were two things: connection and community. And it really, in that darkness, this opportunity to join forces with Josh Linkner, with Peter Sheehan and Ryan Estes started to percolate of this opportunity to not do this alone, to not do it by ourselves, to be able to support and grow each other's businesses and practices, to raise each other up, but then to also take and build upon this incredible work that Josh and the team at Three Ring Circus had built and created over the past now almost 5 years at Three Ring Circus, to say, all of the things I wish someone would have told me when we first started out in this business, or quite frankly, even over the last 10 years, every step along the way to bring a little more rigor, a little more science, a little bit more systems and support, to not make the same mistakes that so many people before us have made. And I couldn't be more proud to get to be a part of this and to get to spend time with so many of you that are on. We've got almost 50 people who are in the trenches, beating on your craft every single day and trying to bring a message that you believe needs to be heard to the world. I feel very fortunate, but not only from myself, but for the 4 partners. When you think about, just the client roster, the impact that we've had, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a single major organization literally in the world that the 4 of us haven't worked with at some point over the past 15. I think Pete has us all beat at now almost 20 years. But this is just a snapshot of some of the brands that I and the 4 of us have worked with. We've been very, very fortunate to be able to have access to some of the biggest stages in the world. And to put some hard numbers around that, what does that look like? How is that broken down? Over the last, I'm pushing almost 15 years. I've delivered 750 plus keynotes, touched and spoke to over a million plus people, spoke in 7 countries, and have generated close to $10 million in speaking fees. And I don't put those numbers up or show you the logos on the prior slide to brag or to try to puff myself up. I'm still a student in this game. I'm learning from others. I'm learning from Josh and Pete and Ryan every single day. But I put this up because we want to show you that we're in the trenches with you right now. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this, is because we felt like there are very few actual people in the trenches doing the work who are simultaneously teaching others how to do this. There's a lot of people who are trying to sell you on something, to be a social media influencer, to get on stages, but they've never worked with the brands that we have or understood how do you really captivate and move the bureau channel to the degree that the four of us have. So it really is about service. And speaking about the industry as a whole and why we're doing this, it really distills down to a couple of things. This is helping people access bigger stages, higher fees, and greater impact. Yes, there is an opportunity to be able to make more money. That is a part of this game, and the good that you can do with that. But we have a deep desire, a real value to want to make an impact on the world. And we know that our individual reach only goes so far, but our collective reach through this community, every single one of you that we give a few strategies to, a few systems that helps you amplify and extend your voice in your reach, we collectively get to be a part of that ripple effect that all of us then get to go out and try to move the needle on impacting the world. Why are we doing this? All of us are speaking full time. In fact, the past 2 years now that we've recovered from COVID, we're extremely busy. So why are we pausing and taking time to do this? A couple of reasons. One, there's a core belief in abundance. I'm going to show you some of the numbers of the size and scale of this industry. There is zero fear that if we go out and help 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 people become experts and more proficient at getting on stages and impacting audiences, it doesn't take anything away from us. This pie is so huge. There is more than enough to go around. I mean, some could look at the four partners and say, you four are our competitors. And the truth is that we do compete. Through the years, in fact, I just saw that I lost a deal to Pete today. That happens all the time. I win one over Ryan. Ryan wins one over Josh. That has always been true, but we know that collectively, more than enough to go around. We'll each get ours. And that's true for all of you. We want to help you rise because we know that it doesn't take anything away from what we're going to get. Two, few high quality options. And that's not to knock or take away any of the other platforms out there, but I just really believe in my bones that you're going to be hard pressed to find four people who are in the trenches doing the work like we are, who are then also teaching. So we thought there was a great opportunity to be able to do this and a need in the marketplace. The other two big ones that come up is just this idea to help the industry that we love. This is an industry that's changed our lives, changed our families' lives, given us an opportunity to travel all over the world and do something that we love. We want to be able to give back. And then the last two is this idea of impact in community. And you're going to hear me talk a lot more about this. And we all have this deep desire to want to feel connected to something larger than ourselves, to feel like we belong, to be a part of something, to walk into a room with a group of people who understand and know what it is that you are trying to create and what you've been through. And we're really committed to that. But there's so much opportunity out there. It really is unbelievable. In fact, this snapshot, I think, it really sort of helps anchor us into just how big is this. I mean, look at some of these numbers. If you ever start to feel a little bit of scarcity mindset creep into you of like, God, is there enough out there for me? 150,000 paid keynotes per year. That's just in the US. That's not thinking globally. And certainly one of the advantages that COVID has helped us with this advent and explosion of virtual is the global opportunities that are presenting themselves. 2.4 million searches for quote unquote motivational speaker. And while I don't think any of us want to be tagged specifically as a motivational speaker, it just goes to show the appetite and the desire for what I would call buyers are really looking for, which is inspiration and the activation of an audience to create outcomes, to change behaviors and produce great results. 100,000 professional speakers worldwide, $4 billion of market opportunity just in North America. Some of these interesting numbers down below: 397,000 creativity keynote speakers, 268,000 sales keynote speakers around searches, 120,000 searches for branding keynote speakers. So you just think, 250,000 people typing in sales keynote speaker. The opportunity is there for all of us to be able to get ours. I do think it's worth just talking about a couple of myths that we want to bust. For those of you who are sort of kicking the tires, exploring this, you're sort of interested, what is this thing? Let's talk about some of them. So first of all, there's definitely a myth that, this is an easy profession. And I think part of where that comes from is because it's easy to get into the game, per se. It's easy to throw up a website. It's easy to call yourself a professional speaker. There's literally zero barrier to entry for that. And, you've given a couple of pretty stellar toasts at a couple of parties, and you feel like, I can do this. I'm pretty funny. I'm pretty personal. People like me. Boom, let's go. And the truth is, like most things that are rewarding, it takes an incredible amount of hard work, tenacity, and really understanding the science behind it if you want to be great. Another one is competition is weak. And I think, especially for those of us who came out of industry, for those of you, maybe you were in industry and you're looking at leaving and starting your own thing. I remember distinctly 2 annual events at my management consulting firm that we held, and we brought in outside speakers. And both years, I remember watching a couple of people that went up there and just thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, if these jokers can do this, I can absolutely do this. Like that person was terrible. And it's easy to think, because you saw one bad speaker at a lunch and learn, that the competition is weak and that it's going to be a piece of cake. But the truth is, as you move through quote unquote the fee ranks, where the competition and the expertise starts to really elevate, the competition is anything but weak. And it's good to remind ourselves that, because it does force you to continue to pound on your own craft. Competition's fierce. Success will be immediate. Again, I think because the barriers to entry are so low, boom, get in. I've got a slick website. I was able to capture some video footage. This is going to happen right away. It's absolutely not true. It doesn't mean that it has to take years, but it does require the patience to be able to put in the time in order to make it pop. Talent beats skill. This is classic growth mindset versus, fear and limiting belief mindset, fixed mindset. This is not, yes, talent can help, but skill will ultimately take you to the promised land. And the good news about talent versus skill, and that it is about skill, is that skills can be developed and learned. So if we enter into that space of like, I don't know that I'm the most exceptional orator on the planet. However, I'm committed to the tactical skills that I know can be developed. And we're going to talk about some of the specifics today, and then also point to what we really go into at boot camp. These are learned things. And so if we operate from a growth mindset, which is I have infinite capacity through hard work and dedication to get better, I can learn this. I can do this. I think it's incredibly liberating. Last one is the transfer bias. And we see this all the time, because, the 3-ring circus team has had an opportunity to work with 4-star generals and past CEOs and successful athletes and professional athletes. The idea is, if I've been great, super successful in one field, certainly when I come into this, it's going to be a no-brainer. It will absolutely transfer. And it's just not true. While there are certain characteristics, competencies, routines, rituals, and habits that you potentially developed in your other field, they will serve and support you as you step into this. But there is no guarantee. It's not an immediate transfer. And you've maybe seen that. I think, we've all seen a few ex-professional athletes that were unbelievable in their particular sport and field. And then they get up there and you can tell that they've not done the work or put in the reps to be a remarkable speaker. What does it take? So we talked a little bit about some of the myth busters. Let's talk about what it takes. And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here for a group that was willing to show up and dedicate time to do just this. many of you, you embody these things. It takes grit. It takes, that real determination to continue to beat on it. It takes investment, both with time and money and resources. Fortunately, I think it's never been more economically affordable to be able to get into this. I think back, 15 years ago, what it cost you to get a website done, what it cost you to get any branding work done, video work done, you tens and tens and tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. When I first started working for David and Lynn, they were just exiting out of sending VHS tapes to speaking bureaus, and they were sending DVDs. Just think about that. I remember the storage closet that was filled with DVDs to send their speaking reel to bureaus. That was a big part of Bureau's value proposition to their clients, was they had the DVDs of all the speakers. Think about that transformation. And so the investment today, while it still requires it, it's never been lower, which gives us no excuse, but it also makes, more people can enter, lower barriers to entry, more competition. It takes a deep commitment to the craft. And it's one of the things that, I love about this community and I love about my partners is they are going to work on themselves, whether it's deepening their expertise in their area of subject or just the stagecraft. They're always curious, they're always learning, they're always asking questions. Patience, tenacity, curiosity, service focus, it's all of those things. The patience front, I think what I'll say to you specifically there is, again, depending upon where you're at in your journey, I spent years delivering content, especially when I was, working under David and Lynn on their platform. I spent years speaking in small breakout rooms, in the back corner of conferences, not on the main stage, not in the big room, and you're in a corner where very few people walked by the sign. You get 5 people trickled into a room that was set for 100, and it is the patience to keep doing the reps, because every small breakout room that you do and you deliver at your highest level helps you get one step closer to the big room, to the main stage. But you can't skip it. Now maybe you get lucky and your book pops, you have a big social media moment and you get thrust into the spotlight, maybe. But the truth is, for most of us, you got to put in the reps and it takes patience. So if it doesn't happen just in this year alone, don't give up. Tenacity, hang in there, and stay curious, which again, knowing that you're all here, I love this. You're absolutely demonstrating absolutely all of these. So as we think about the speaking business, and I'm going to sort of break down some of the nuts and bolts of what we're going to get into both today and to give some perspective on what we do during our flagship program, Boot Camp. So I hear Mary Kelly saying, I cannot hear anything. So I'm assuming, since I haven't heard that from anyone else, is anyone else having any issues audio-wise hearing me? I'm seeing head shaking no. So Mary, I'm sorry. We may have to. Cool. I see a lot of no issues. That may be on your end, Mary. So we think about this business as actually the culmination and collection of 3 separate businesses. And we label them and think of them in terms of expert, promoter, performer. There are really 3 parts of your business that you're continually refining, tweaking, and devoting time and energy on. Your expertise, your subject matter expertise knowledge, the research around that, the creation of your content. That's a key area of focus. Now, for some of us, we can find ourselves gravitating towards one of these more than the other. We just want to be a researcher, and we think that if we just do that, everything else will take care of itself. I've been guilty of that in the past. And then we take our eye off the ball, these other 2 parts of our business, and that can be detrimental. It can hurt our overall numbers. Then there's the promotion part. How do I get myself on stages? I feel like I've got something important to say. I feel like my stage skills are very, very dialed in, but I can't get myself on stages. For a number of us, that is the problem. So what are some of the factors there that we can do, the levers that we can pull to give ourselves more opportunities? And then the last one is, from a performance standpoint, stagecraft, storytelling capabilities, our ability to persuade and influence and move an audience through an experience, whether it's 20 minutes, 60 minutes, or a full day. To do that at its highest level, each one of these has to be thought about individually. So we're going to start out in this expert lane. And after each one of these sections, I'm going to open up some time for some questions. And I've seen a number of great comments coming in. I'm going to get a chance to review those a little bit. And I may have a surprise. I think Josh Linkner may have popped into this room. I don't know if he'll stay on the whole time, but if he does, I may pull him up, see if we can't ping him with some questions to get him to drop some of his knowledge bombs. So let's first jump into this first circle, this first part of the business of expertise. So let's talk about the expert. So within this, one of the big things that I think of, sort of the analogy and comment that comes up all the time, is this idea of dude, pick a lane. And we've all been on the highway before and we see somebody who's splitting traffic and riding over both lanes. And what we mean by that analogy from a speaking standpoint is, when we first get into this space, it's really easy to sort of be pulled in a number of directions around our particular content. I understand leadership. I like innovation. I also think sales is a good opportunity, but I also hear a lot of people are talking about customer service and experience. And so we try to be all things to all people. And that is an absolute recipe for disaster. The marketplace absolutely rejects generalists, somebody who's 2 inches deep and 2 miles wide across a bunch of different topics. And the marketplace absolutely loves, particularly the speaking bureau channel, and we're going to talk about that today because I know that's an important space for a lot of us. It's one thing for us to understand our value proposition and what we talk about and communicate that directly to a client, but we have to develop such specificity, such clarity, that a third party, right, a bureau agent, a speaking bureau, can understand us in a very short period of time, categorize us, and communicate our value proposition to the marketplace. Specificity, being able to go 2 miles deep and 2 inches wide, will help set us apart around the content and topic of our choosing. So how do we pick a lane if you're in that phase of your journey right now? Well, as we sort of think about it, it's sort of the collision of 2 key components. The first is just thinking in terms of big, broad topics, right? Leadership, customer experience, talent, innovation, creativity, the list goes on. Those would be some of the big themes. Diversity, equity, inclusion could be another one of them. But then within that, we also then want to think in terms of what's a unique niche, a unique niche that you can carve out within one of those big brand topics, big broad topics. And within that, we really find a unique sweet spot. And I think a lot of people, they get lost in the shuffle because they take and sort of categorize themselves exclusively under a big broad topic, and they don't do the second component of the unique niche. And it's one of the reasons why sometimes people often struggle. And I'll give you an example of this. Bob Dewson is a good example of this. So Bob's been a great client, longtime friend of the Three Ring Circus team. Bob was very successful in his own right before he started to engage in work with the team. Bob had written a book about leadership. He was an executive coach. Had no shortage of back-end expertise and knowledge, but he was sort of getting lost in the mix of leadership speakers, the thousands and thousands and thousands of quote-unquote leadership speakers out there. And so the team sort of worked with him to say, okay, we've got leadership, but what's the unique niche, the lens through which you see the world that can help sort of carve out a unique space to you? Well, what they found in conversation was that Bob actually has this sort of great comedic background and had this sort of performance comedy bend to himself. And so the idea then was, well, how do we combine leadership with your comedy background without just being, the leadership comedian that goes out and tells jokes? And where they landed, I think, was an absolutely beautiful sort of brand positioning case study of leadership lessons from Saturday Night Live. And I really like this. So what Bob did, let me just make sure I didn't lose you here. What Bob did is, they studied and literally watched years worth of episodes of Saturday Night Live, read every book on the subject, interviewed past cast members to really think about, because if you think about Saturday Night Live, it's essentially, it's an organization that has had to evolve through 3-4 decades now. I think, what did they start in the late 70s? 4-5 decades of innovation and transformation and keeping a pulse on the marketplace. Where is the cultural zeitgeist of the moment to be able to attract the best talent, to be then a talent development machine. Think about how many massive movie star comedians came out of Saturday Night Live. It's actually quite fascinating. You start to break it down of like all of the interesting leadership lessons that could be taken from that. And think about then Bob's differentiation in the marketplace against every other generic leadership speaker. So put yourself in the shoes of a buyer, and they're evaluating potential speakers to go with. And it's like, I see 10 leadership speakers and I literally cannot tell the difference between any of them. In fact, they're probably going to give us similar parables. It's going to be the same sound bites, the same old overused cliches. But then I've got Bob over here and it's like, oh, Saturday Night Live, that's interesting. That'll be funny. That's a unique look. And it creates separation and differentiation. And so I want you to think about what that might mean for yourself. And I'm going to give you an example of a recent client that we just worked with over the past, I think it's been 12 to 18 months. Sterling Hawkins. And Sterling found himself in a similar situation. Sterling came out of industry, was an executive, had built a sort of back wheel of knowledge and expertise, but was sort of getting lost in the sea of competition and looking for a way to be able to differentiate and really own a position in the marketplace. And I think I'll leave it to Sterling to tell you a little bit about his experience in working with us and what's happened to his business.
Sterling Hawkins here, creator of the No Matter What system and leader of the No Matter What movement, if you couldn't have guessed. Now, No Matter What only exists because of Three Ring Circus and my work with Josh Linkner and the team. Going back only several years, I was what amounted to a no-name leadership and innovation speaker. And I was working, but every single stage I got on took a lot of effort. Messaging people on LinkedIn, going to conference websites, pestering bureaus, doing anything and everything. And in my work with Three Ring Circus, they took really the last decade of my career, of my work around innovation and leadership, and crystallized it into a message that was really consumable by the people hiring keynote speakers, which turned out was the missing piece. They said, instead of talking about leadership and innovation and results, no matter what is the lead. And well, the rest was history. No Matter What was born. Now, we probably get 10 times the inquiries, direct inquiries now than we did prior to working with them. And they've also fostered a lot of relationships with bureaus, deepened some connections with bureaus that were already representing us and connecting us to new ones. They also helped me navigate being represented by one of the bureaus as a manager. And that's been hugely transformative as well. You know, I cannot say enough about Josh and the team there. They've done so much for me. Their generosity, their creativity, their support, really their true interest in helping speakers become more successful and get their message out there has been transformative for me and for many. I obviously can't say enough about them. If you're somebody that's interested in becoming a keynote speaker, a highly paid, successful keynote speaker that's getting on stages, Three Ring Circus is definitely the way to go.
So great to get a little perspective on Sterling. He's been on an incredible journey. And what I love about Sterling is, you know, his commitment to keep working on it. He's come so far, and they've done so much work on his content and his brand positioning. And you know, Josh and I were on a 90-minute call with him last week, and he's continuing to push on all aspects of his business so that he can go to the next level. And I just, Sterling, if you're out there listening, you catch this pre-recording, I appreciate your commitment to beating on the craft, brother. So we're talking a little bit about, you know, identifying sort of your unique niche. What we want to do now is be able to connect the dots for the marketplace. You know, how do I take my topic, this position, and then effectively communicate the value of it to the marketplace? What is my value proposition? What are the outcomes that we can create with our clients? How do I talk about what I actually do? And so one of the ways we attack that is to sort of think through a couple of what we call brand defining questions. And it breaks down a little bit like this. And I think this is excellent homework. This is an example of something that, even 8 years into my career, this was a while back, I hadn't actually sat down and worked to articulate this with true discipline. So you may be quite far in your journey, and this could be a great opportunity to be able to break down. So number one, we want to think in terms of the problem. Specifically is this idea of what's the burning problem audiences face? What's the burning problem? And listen, I think this question, all of these questions, they're great to do not only from a big picture standpoint of how you position yourself, but I also use these with every single client. I had a kickoff call this morning, and as we're starting to understand who the audience is, I'm trying to understand this. What is the burning problem for them? What is the big challenge, and how can I help contribute to helping them move through, past, overcome that with our time together? If I'm not clear on that, I'm lost. I'm just up there talking about what I want to talk about and staying on my message instead of focusing on my audience. Credibility question is, why am I the best person to solve it? So what's the burning problem, and what gives me the right or the credibility to stand firmly, in my place and raise my hand and say, I'm the person to help you move through this. And then the third question, oftentimes what I've found in our students, and I even have been guilty of this, is we get those two right and then we stop. We stop just short of the third, and I think maybe most critical question, which is, what's the transformation? So what does the ideal future state look like after having worked through us? Where are we trying to move to? We want to be super clear, current state, future state, and then we can work through how we actually move them. So these are the big brand defining questions. And we took this a step farther to think about how we talk about ourselves in the marketplace. And I love this idea of, under the theme of sort of crafting the ideal pitch, is this idea of PCT, problem, credibility, transformation. And I see a number of you smiling and nodding your heads like, this to me, this is a perfect example of the work that we're doing, where from the outside, it may seem quite simple, but it is transformative in the impact that it can have on your business. And few people actually take the time to do it. And this comes up all the time. People will ask, I see it because I see other people ask other professional speakers or authors and thought leaders, what do you do? And the answer to that question of what do you do, particularly on a sales call or even in passing, sort of this meandering, winding answer, super, obscure, that no one really quite understands but you, does them a disservice. Versus having a little structure around it. The idea of PCT. What's the big problem? What's your credibility? Why you? And then what's the transformation? And so, just to maybe give you an example of this, like for me, so, we're studying and focusing on the future of work. So how might I go about thinking about PCT just for me? And what I'll do is I'm going to hold up a finger when we're in each one of these sections. So when we're talking about problem, when we're talking about my credibility, when we're talking about transformation. So let me think about this. Now, I get put on the spot here and I'm like, I better know my PCT. We think about it. So we're entering one of the most dynamic moments in the history of the future of work. In fact, there is no one future of work. There are only futures of work. There have never been so many paths forward, and there's never been more at stake. This requires leaders to make big, bold bets about how they structure work and their organization moving forward in order to attract great talent, keep great talent, activate high-performance teams that are rooted in psychological safety and belonging so that they can ultimately compete and win in their marketplace. For the past 15 years, I have been in the trenches working shoulder to shoulder with some of the most inspiring leaders at some of the world's biggest brands to help them spot the trends, to navigate disruption, and ultimately activate high-performance cultures and tap into people's desire to work in more humane, heart-centered, leader-led cultures. In doing that, number three, organizations experience greater retention, higher productivity, greater performance, and ultimately navigate and move through moments of disruption with more peace, ease, and grace. So that would be an example of that. Now, can I refine that? Can I tighten that up? Absolutely. But I will tell you, just even in that structure, and I could probably sit down and do more homework around that. But I'll tell you, even at a high level of that, I've used that in sales pitches just as recently as right after Thanksgiving and closed the deal. And I know because that video sales pitch was so tight and so concise, and I had specifically mapped the transformation that client I knew in the brief was trying to experience. I called it out. And so leverage the PCT for yourself. I'd be curious if anybody is willing to share their PCT. Do we have anybody who's, if I come over here, pop a hand up. I'm just curious. We've got a little bit of time here. Anybody having done their PCT willing to give it a go? Any takers? Let me pull you all up here. I see a hand going up. It looks like, is that Keith? Keith, my man, let's go. I love it.
All right. Burning problem is that most people don't even come close to reaching their full potential. My credibility, I ran an agency for 25 years, everything from building Frontier's website to Remax's, American Express to Lumineers. I have worked with some of the biggest brands in the company. After 25 years of making a lot of money doing that, I decided to stop trading my time for money. And I wrote a book, I created a product, and I'm living my personal why. So through this structure, tools, and techniques, I can help anybody accomplish their life's vision and be the best version of themselves.
Boom! Let's give him a round of applause. Everybody give some. I love it. So Keith, before you jump off, have you been working on that for some time? Have you been with the team? We haven't had a chance to connect, or did you just pull that out right now from work that you've been doing?
From work that I've been doing, so I'm actually a huge fan of Peter's. So I've been following him for a while, learning through osmosis, not intentionality. Really excited to actually do a boot camp with you guys. I fell into speaking when I created this book. I had an opportunity to do it, and that's when I fell in love with doing it. It was like, okay, I found my why. I'm going to release the sunk equity of having built a business that's not my life's purpose for 2 decades and step into what I want to be doing. And I want to level it up. You know, right now I do 3 or 4 talks a month. My fees between $2,500 and $7,500, but I want to get to where you guys play.
Awesome. I love it. Well, I so appreciate you jumping in and doing it. I'm a big fan of Peter as well. He's brilliant. And I'm so excited for you to get to boot camp because we're just scratching the surface here on this stuff, and all of the mechanics to take you where you want to go are there. Speaking of boot camp, let's give a little perspective on where else are we going to go with our time, specifically around the idea of the expert part of your business. We actually have a full-blown expertise development plan template. Like how do you, and I know that was a question that came up of like literally your routines, rituals, and habits of identifying what are your sources of information. How do you find the gems? How do you find the case studies? We break all of that down. Accelerated credibility strategies. How do you make that come to life faster? Content development model, right? So part of our work is we're doing the research, but then we also need to be publishing thought leadership as well. Multimodal delivery framework, thinking through that. Content criteria checklist, like what content are we actually both publish but present? What boxes do they need to check? What's the criteria before I really say that's the right case study, that's the right story, that's the right insight? And then a fast track research model so that you're able to do the work as efficiently as possible to ensure that the content that you're presenting, it's sound from a research perspective. So with that, I'm going to pause for a second and let's just open up for any questions specifically in this sort of camp around the expert. Does anybody have any questions at this stage of the game? I'm going to change our view here so I can see all your faces. Anybody have any questions from what we've talked about thus far on the expertise front? No, we good? All right. All right, let me pop this back. Speaker view. And get a little sip of my coffee here to keep rolling. All right, let's jump into the promoter. Back. So let's talk promoter. When we think about how we drive the business, it really comes down to two factors that we're constantly tracking and measuring: fee and volume, right? And in fact, when I look in the chat box, this is what many people are mentioning, right? It's like number of events, where my fee is at. These are the two big factors that drive everything that we do. And so in our promoter section, this is really where we go to work on the mechanics of moving that fee and our volume up. And just to give a little perspective on the impact that these strategies can have on an individual business. In fact, and I think Eric is, I can't see him in front of me right now, but I know he was on here in the beginning. And again, it just speaks to the perpetual student that he is. I think it's the common characteristic and theme of the people who've had the biggest impact on their businesses. They're the ones that are showing up every single time we're putting out content. Eric could probably teach this class at this point. And so just to get a little perspective on what Eric has experienced in working with the Three Ring Circus team and the impact to his business, I'll let you hear firsthand from him. So here's Eric.
Hi there, my name is Eric Tremundi. I'm the author of Rethink Work and global keynote speaker. When I take the stage, I've got one goal, and that's to help leaders build tomorrow's greatest places to work. I wouldn't have been able to tell you that 4 years ago when I first walked into the Three Ring Circus. I was probably doing 30 events a year. I had a very, it was a fee that allowed me to be a full-time speaker, but not really to build the career. I didn't understand the industry, the ins and outs, how it worked with bureaus, how to structure the presentation, how to ultimately build the business. And that's ultimately what the Three Ring Circus taught me. It taught me how to work more effectively with bureaus. It introduced me to my today manager, and ultimately has allowed me to increase my business about 500%. That's not even rounding. In fact, if I was rounding, I'd be rounding down. Three Ring Circus has been transformational to allow me to work with now over 32 bureaus from all over the world, to speak on about 400 stages. And I just finished my last keynote today of two for I think probably event number 65 or 66 of the year. What Josh and the team has been able to do to help me with my business, the understanding of the industry, and ultimately with my positioning, my messaging, my content, my structure, and how everything works has enabled me to live a life that I never thought was possible. I don't say this as a favor for Josh or as a favor for anyone at the Three Ring Circus. I say this because it's true. Without them, I wouldn't be where I am today. And if you're looking to make that next step in your career, if you want this to be the thing that gets you to the next level, I encourage you to make the investment. I've been 3 times now. I'm just trying to make sure there's no scheduling conflict on number 4 and 5. Everyone's become friends. The speaking industry is now just this large family for me that I've been happy to be welcomed into. I fully support the Three Ring Circus, Josh, the team, and everything they've done to allow me to live what I thought was only a dream. Good luck with everything, and feel free to reach out anytime.
Eric, so appreciate your remarks. And again, I think you really deserve all of the credit and the shout out to acknowledge how much work that you've put in. Yes, the team, the work with Josh has been impactful, but you're the one who's done the work. And I think it speaks volumes that on a Wednesday at 12 o'clock, you're here for probably what is maybe your 20th inside look. I think you've probably attended 4 or 5 boot camps, and that's what's required. It's that spirit to continually show up and do the work. And so to see the kind of results that you've experienced, and I know, speaking for all the partners, we've watched as you've developed the clarity, as you've come into your own, you found your voice. Someone mentioned it in the chat. I don't have it in front of me right now, but that idea of not only speaking with your head, but also with your heart, making that head to heart connection. You're doing all of that. So kudos to you for all the hard work, brother. So let's talk a little bit about this idea of the mechanics, the science behind driving fee and volume. And, I love what Josh and the team did around this idea of just sort of being creative. Like if we could articulate or find all of the factors, the nuances the characteristics that ultimately equate to a fee set and driving volume, what would that look like? And the idea of video games and superheroes sort of came up. If you've ever played video games before and you're picking a particular player, they usually have some scores attached to their skills. You know, this with the Silver Surfers, like special powers is 50, cunning is 6, strength is 18, technology is 90, and you're sort of comparing that against other potential players to ultimately pick who you want to go to battle with, so to speak, or move through the game. And so the idea was, well, could we do the same thing from a speaker standpoint? Is there a set number of factors that ultimately drive performance, volume, and fee, instead of it being just sort of obscure, right? Like, why is, especially when it's close, like, why is this person 10 and this person 25? Why is this person 30 and getting 100 offers a year, and I'm 20 and getting 20 offers a year? How do I find the nuance there? And so I'm going to give you an example of this idea of the speaker performance card. And if you haven't done one of these for yourself, if this is your first time joining us, I think it's really important for you to sit down and build one of these speaker performance cards for yourself. And I'll give you an example. I'm going to use myself, and we're super open and transparent in this work. I want you to see the inner workings of my business. Josh, Pete, and Ryan, they do the same thing. There's nothing here that we're unwilling to share. So I'm going to put this out, and you can see exactly sort of where I see my business. So here's our speaker performance card. So first of all, my topic area is future of work. Fee right now, $27.5. And as we sort of move through each one of these factors, I'll give you a little perspective. So under the promoter section, there's sort of 3 indicators that we're measuring. This, first of all, this idea of fame and reach. And this for me is one of the lowest on the factor. I'm not famous. I don't have a huge social media reach. This is not something that's super strong for me. Now, certainly I know this is an area where, if I can move that fame and reach number up a little bit, that's going to substantially impact my overall fee and volume. Do I want to be famous? No, I don't. Are there some things that we can do on a social media front to maybe extend reach? Of course, there's the opportunity there. What about brand polish? So brand polish, for those of you who've maybe had a chance to check out my website, or you're experiencing, even my virtual set right now. This, obviously, we're set up for green screen. Behind this green screen, I've got a pretty epic and beautiful studio that we've built out, none of which existed prior to COVID. This was all a total reinvention and learning how to do this. I mean, even just going between videos in this, I didn't know how to pull that stuff off, which, by the way, today, there's no virtual producer here, so I'm managing all of this, which, by the way, thank you for your patience if you see me needing to adjust a couple of things. But this is an extension of the brand. And while I think it's pretty good and we've done a lot of work, it can absolutely be better. There are things that we can do. What about hustle? Hustle, I think I hustle pretty hard, and then I started spending time with Josh Linkner, and I realized that I'm not hustling hard at all. Josh redefines what it means to hustle. And so I would not put myself as a 9 or a 10 on the hustle front. I work hard, but I'm not working that hard. So there could be some improvement on there. Credibility. Credibility is a 6. And Greg or Connie, I see you popping off right now. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you got some value. If you've got follow-up questions, send us a note, anything we can do to help. Credibility, well, we've done a lot of work, 15 plus years in this, certainly more can be done. More books, more research, more time in the field. Topic demand for me right now is an absolute 10. Obviously, future of work is right in the zeitgeist of the moment. And I was sort of well positioned. I made that pivot back in 2013. The topic had some traction now, sort of, somewhat like the generations theme. People are always curious about the next generation. People are always curious about where the world of work is moving next, but certainly COVID put it right in the crosshairs of the conversation of the moment. So that's an absolute 10. Lasting impact, I think the work that we do, I try to bring inspiration and entertainment, but we really are also trying to leave people with things that are going to move the needle, both in their life and for the organization. And so from an impact standpoint, 7, substance and depth, we try to bring a fair amount of rigor from a research perspective to be sound in the data that we're presenting, and bring some real world experience to that. In the performer category, we've got three big line items here: stage skills, entertainment, and fun factor. Stage skills, from a stage skill perspective, I think I can get better, but this is a place where I feel like I shine. When we ask clients, what's the number one reason, why did you decide to move forward with Seth? 9 times out of 10, they say energy, enthusiasm, overall experience we had in the room. And so that's something that we've worked hard at, and we'll talk about that in the performer section. Entertainment value, while I try to be engaging, I'm not a comedian. I'm not telling jokes. There's definitely probably some work we could do on the entertainment front. I've tried to incorporate more of that in our virtual setting, even just tossing the video. The idea of, in our virtual setting, it's really important to remember we're constantly playing with 2 forces, novelty and tension. And we want to be thinking about that. Novelty and tension. What do we mean by novelty and tension? Novelty is just like, right, is something that's a little dopamine hit in people's brains. Everyone's used to just 15-second scrolls on TikTok right now. And so to sit in front of a static screen for 60 minutes, it doesn't work. And so, I'm incorporating a green screen here. When I drop the green screen and I'm in my studio, we've got whiteboards that come in. We've got multiple camera cuts. I'll toss to a video. It's every 5 to 7-ish minutes, there's movement that's happening, and there's something that's unexpected that comes up. I'll play a funny clip from The Office that was sort of unexpected and creates a comedic moment, right? That's novelty. Tension is, in some of our settings, when we can do things like throw a spotlight on an individual and bring them onto the main stage and have a little engagement. It keeps that level of like people are locked in, because all of a sudden I may need to go. The tension stays up. And so I want you to think in terms of, and you can use that in the real world too, but especially virtually, novelty and tension, where's it baked in? And the fun factor, while I think I'm a fun person, I don't know how fun my programs are. I'd give it a 6. We could probably have more fun. So you add all those up, 6.6 score. Okay, so what does that mean? So that means is I'm thinking about my own fee and volume, and I compare myself, say, to someone like Josh. So Josh is at 35,000. And Josh's score, I think, is more like 6.9 or 7.1. There's a number of factors where Josh is higher than I am. And so if I'm wanting to go to 35, I know exactly where I need to go to work. Now, is this an exact science? No, it's not an exact science. But this has been put in front of not only bureau agents, bureau owners, some of the top speakers in the world, all of the partners, and multiple clients that have come through the 3-Ring Circus community, that I really think this is, at least at a minimum, a great starting list to go for. Now, something interesting that you can do when we work with clients is understanding what is the 3-Ring Circus, what we call boost, from having gone to work in these areas with us through our methodology. And the numbers are pretty unbelievable. In fact, across the board, on average, our clients see an increase in volume of 76% and an increase in fee in 46%, for an overall total revenue boost of 156% from having gone through the work, done the work, and implemented these strategies. And I think, just hearing from Eric just blew those numbers completely out of the water. But on average, this is where we see people land. And the truth is, even as a partner in this business, having gone to work on some of these things as of late, I'm seeing the impact in my own business. Now, if you're curious and you're sort of wondering where you're at and what the impact would be from coming and hanging with us at a boot camp, I've actually got a great little tool, a little calculate your boost. So this is on the 3-Ring Circus website. I think there's a tab at the bottom of the page that will bring you to the calculator. And so you can type in where you're currently at and then hit, calculate my boost and see what sort of impact we could make on your business by implementing this methodology. Now, this is just one example of the approach that we've really tried to take to this business of thinking about, speaking as a science, to really analyze all of the key KPIs in our business. What drives volume? What drives revenue? How do I impact that? And how do I track that? Now, for all of us as partners inside of 3-Ring Circus, let me just make sure I'm back here. Inside of 3-Ring Circus, we all have what we call our speaker dashboard. And this is just a fictitious, obviously, Marge Simpson's not on the team, but it gives you an example. We have and we're tracking these exact numbers. And I think this is an example. I don't know any other speakers that are doing it to this degree of tracking. So every week we're looking at confirmed dates, booked revenue, that blended average fee. Where is the fee at over time? Pending holds, right? Looking out, we know if pending holds are getting, are only 5 or 10, right? That's an indicator of I need more flow, more demand. My holds lead to confirms, ultimately driving revenue. That 12-month forward pacing, I can see what's happening. We're tracking industries, tracking bureaus. Where are the industries I'm getting penetration right now? Does that mean that I should spend more time developing and building relationships? Thanks, Lena, for throwing it. So Lena threw in the ROI calculator into the chat. So at some point today, grab that and give yourself a calculation. I also really love trending bureaus. As you start to get busy, it's easy, you get caught up in the day-to-day work, and it's like, premier speakers, gosh, it's been 12 months since we did a deal, or we only did 2 deals with them this year. Like, maybe there's something I can do there. That's a reach out. Maybe it's a bureau visit. Maybe I send them a gift, or I've got a bureau that, I didn't realize we just did a half a dozen events with them over the last 5 months. Maybe I need to do something special for them. So tracking all of this to ultimately ensure we're hitting our numbers and moving our fee north. Now, that's a question that comes up all the time. How do I where should my fee be at? And 100%, I see Pete Sheehan just jumped in the room. That's awesome. So Pete and Josh, I may have you guys come hang at the end and see if we can take in any questions. Pete, I hope your virtual went well. I don't think you're on site today. I think you had a virtual. So we're talking a little bit about setting your fee. And this is an example of something that I so wish I had early in my career, because it's hard. Where do you come in at? And so we've created this idea of the 70% rule. What's the 70% rule? So first of all, in setting a number, it helps to get a little bit of feedback from the industry. If you've got friends, you've got colleagues, now you know us, some people who can at least take a look at what you've got, where you're at, and give you an idea. But let's say you're on your own and you're thinking, I'm an innovation speaker and I'm looking in the marketplace based on my experience, and I think I could probably go out for $10,000. What you want to do is you want to go out and find 5 or 10 individuals, competitors that are speaking on your topic at your fee and price point. So I would want to go out, and almost all of this is public knowledge and available. All the bureaus put all of this information out. I'd look for innovation speakers at $10,000. And I would do a speaker scorecard brand evaluation of their brand versus my own. Now, you're going to have to make some assumptions about some of the things, but at a high level, going through that list of 10 and seeing, where is their number at? So if my competitors I see are at a 7.6 and my speaker scorecard is a 4.3 and they're at 10 and I'm trying to charge 10, I may have to reconsider that. I want to be on par to start with. Then moving into the idea of 70% rule is I want to position myself at a price point where I can win 70% of the opportunities that I am presented with. So there's 10 bureau holds come in, I've got 10 sales opportunities, and I'm competing because we all compete against other people who are similarly priced in our category. I want to be able to win 7 out of 10. Now you might be thinking, well, that's maybe not maximizing for revenue. Maybe I should, be more expensive. I should increase my fee, and even if I win 3 or 4, I would have made more money. But the truth is, there is a flywheel effect. I want to be priced accordingly so that I can create real demand. If I'm winning 7 out of 10, particularly as we're working with the bureaus, because the flip side happens. A bureau agent puts you in 10 proposals and you only win 1 or 2, in their mind, it's unlikely they're going to continue to put you in front of clients because they're saying something about this person is not resonating. It's not working. But if you win 7 out of 10, and maybe that's because, right, you were priced competitively, you were priced a little bit lower, the more you speak here. And so while there's an ego element to wanting to increase our fee, it feels good. It's scary as you do it, but you're just like, I got to get to 10. I got to get to 15. I got to get to 20. And you can maybe potentially beat yourself up at that price point. We want volume. I find most of the clients that we're interacting with, the issue is not fee, the issue is volume. How do I get more top of the funnel flow activity to get me more reps, more at bats in front of more audiences? 70% rule is a great way to sort of fine tune and dial in where you need to be at price point wise. So that's an example of some of the tools and strategies that we talk about at boot camp underneath this category of the promoter. What else do we talk about at boot camp? A couple of other things, right? Because we're just scratching the surface with our time today. We're doing a deep dive on where meeting planners' heads and hearts are at right now. What do they want? What does the research say? Which helps inform all of the decisions that many of us are making, both planners and the bureau channel, with our brand, our assets, content that's resonating, et cetera. Bundled value tactics to boost close rates. Like how do I stack value in a sales process to be able to win more business? What else could I deliver to be able to differentiate from my competition? Optimal approaches to bureau outreach and relationships. There is so much gold in that section. We all want to be able to develop deeper relationships with bureaus, but it's also being mindful of the fact that they are getting literally 50 to 100 emails every single day from people that are saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, please book me. So how do we break through the noise? How do we differentiate? How do we build real connections there? Dissection of the buying process, thinking through with our end buyers and the committee process, how do we get across the goal line? DNA of a successful speaker brand. So we'll take people on stage, we'll break down their brands collectively. Brand blueprint, we want you walking out of there with the formula to be able to go attack your brand in the year ahead. The 7 must-have marketing assets and a marketing budget template. It's great to know how much should I be spending, right? Depending upon where you're at, what resources you have available to you as you're navigating and growing your business. What's the metric around that? And so we'll talk about all of those things. So I'm going to pause for a second here in this section of the promoter before we go into our final element around the presenter, and just let's do a moment for if there's any questions. And I've got Pete and Josh, I think, in the room now too. So if anybody's got a specific question for them, maybe I can get them to pop up as well. I'm just going to change my view so I can see all your faces real quick. Any questions in that section? We good? I see. Yep, here to answer and help in any way. Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Perfect. If not, let's jump into our final section for the afternoon. Then we'll leave a little bit of time if any other questions come up. Again, though, I'll just sort of reiterate our next boot camp, and Lena, maybe you can drop that in the chat box as well. March 13th through the 15th. That's starting on a Sunday evening, full day Monday, full day Tuesday. We are going to be, and Jordan's going to laugh at me, a little community north of Naples. It's not in Naples, but I think north of Naples. You're going to be flying into Fort Myers, I believe. Remind me of the exact time. End time on this, Paul. End time on this is 12:30. So we got 20 minutes. To Bonita Springs. Thanks, Josh. We're going to be in Bonita Springs. So if you're someplace cold right now, come down to Florida, hang 2 full days, a great dinner the night before. There's such an element of community and connection here. It's just to lock arms with a group of people who are in the fight with you, and a chance to hang with individuals. A couple of the partners will be down there. We always have a couple of bureau agents that come as well. Sometimes we're able to get a couple of meeting planners. It's a chance to build those relationships here firsthand, and to get in a little bit of warm weather here in the month of March. So 13th through the 15th, Bonita Springs. All right, so with our final 20 minutes here, 20 minutes or so, let's jump into our final section and talk about the performer. So you've done the work. You've built this back-end deep domain expertise. Right? You are a true expert. You know your content. You've got a unique perspective and point of view that you're bringing to the world. You've done the work on the promoter front. You're generating top-of-flow activities. You're getting at-bats. And now you're stepping into the arena, and the opportunity to be able to deliver and do this thing that you love so much has been presented to you. How do you not miss the moment? So let's think first about 5 big myths when it comes to this idea of performance. The first is that the keynote is about you. And I was so guilty of this early on in my career. You think they booked you. You're the expert. You're coming. It's about you. And the truth is, and it's just sort of emblematic of this work in general, is that this is an opportunity and an act of service. It's not about you. It's about our audience. And so you can, at a high level, you'd be like, well, I totally get that. But to pause and sort of think about all of your preparation, everything that you do throughout that entire experience is constantly re-anchoring back to, what does this group need? Where is this audience at? What are the challenges they're facing? How do I help them move through this moment? And when you step on stage and the challenge is when the anxiety kicks in and the nerves kick in and the bright lights hit you, we get very inward focused versus recognizing, paying attention and knowing where is this audience at and what do they need from me? This is not about you. This is about them. 2, you need to star in every story. You don't need to star in every story. In fact, some of the best speakers very rarely tell their own stories. Adam Grant very rarely talks about himself. He's in the research, he's pointing to the data, he's telling external case studies. Simon Sinek, the same, very rarely talks about himself. Brene Brown, she will incorporate herself, but so often it's pointing external to the data. You don't need to be the star. Yes, there are people who, climbed Mount Everest with only, one leg. That story can 100% be about them. For us mere mortals, it doesn't have to be about us. We don't have to be the star. We can tell other people's stories. Truisms are enough. This is another one that I think I was very guilty of early on in my career. We roll out some of the, just sort of overused truisms, something like leadership isn't about you, it's about others. Like that. Okay, great, cool. But that's not new. That's not different. That's not a unique perspective. That's not enough to really differentiate and move the needle. We need to bring a unique perspective, a surprising truth to the conversation. One of the things that the team will work with people on, and this is when we get into the nitty gritty of your actual content, is, just a statement like, most people think X, but the truth is Y. Those are interesting. That helps create differentiation. Instead of just, what's the general truism? Psychological safety drives high performance. Okay, great. But that's not enough. What's my unique perspective and point of view to layer within that? That's where the differentiation happens, gang. Because you know what? Every trainer under the sun that's charging $2,500 to do a room full of small groups knows the truisms. The differentiator between the 2,500 and the 25,000 or the 50,000 is when you bring a unique perspective, a surprising truth to that truism that no one has thought of or seen like before. A keynote can cover several topics. This is a classic challenge many of us run into, especially if you've come out of industry. I think Josh is a great example of this. It's like Josh has built and sold multiple businesses. Josh could talk about talent development, hiring and firing, raising capital, leadership, communication. He could talk about all of those things, but he talks about creativity and innovation. And the discipline in his programs to make sure there is a through line through all of the content that continues to anchor back to that key theme, creativity and innovation, despite the fact that he can talk about all of those, runs through all of it. So when you interrogate your content and curriculum, you look at that keynote and the storyline there of like, am I all over the place here? Am I trying to I'm throwing the kitchen sink at him. I'm talking about innovation. I'm talking about leadership. I'm talking about teamwork. I'm talking about trust. Maybe there is a through line. It makes sense to touch on those drivers, but more often than not, we want to cover one clear topic. When people leave our program and someone asks in one sentence or in one word, could you tell me what that was about? It's such a great indicator. If people are like, it was kind of this and a little bit of that, and I'm not quite sure. No, we're lost. It's like, no, one thing, super clear. Number 5 on this. A keynote and a lesson are the same thing. There's a lot of professors that have developed deep domain expertise in curriculum that try to translate that to the stage. You're not coming to teach a collegiate course. A keynote, there is this element, Ryan Estes calls it edutainment. We're there to both entertain and inform. Josh has a great saying, and I may butcher it, but it's having the entertainment value of a movie, but the substance of a book. And I really love that, of like walking that line. Like, yes, there is an aspect here of like, I need to entertain, but I can't come up here and just teach a collegiate lesson. This isn't just teaching 101 course. There's got to be things that move an audience through an emotional experience over our time together, right? Can it be as emotionally charged, as moving as a movie, but as substantive and informative as a book? It's a great way to think through it. Those are 5 big myths that we often see. And I'm going to leave you with 5 pro tips in approaching the platform in your delivery and performance. Number 1, nail your launch line. What do we mean by launch line? Launch line is the first words that are coming out of your mouth when you step foot on that stage. What's the launch line? So often, and I have been so guilty of this, especially early in my career, you're a little bit loose. You know your content well, but you are a little loose, and you're sort of like, I would always tell myself, I'm going to be in the moment. I'll sort of react to what happens, and maybe the person who does my introduction will give me something to play off of, or I'll comment on the weather, or how many people do you see go up there and say, how's everybody doing this morning? And then they don't get much of applause, and it's like, we can do better than that, and let's do it another. It's like, that's a terrible, terrible start. And unless I've had an executive explicitly tell me, I need you to fire this room up, I need you to be the hype man, the hype person to get this room going, like, I am not starting as those my first words out of my mouth. And what happens is if we stumble out of the blocks with that first statement, and now you're playing catch up. And the worst thing that can happen is if you've got a little bit of anxiety, and it's like, now you start to feel your heart rate accelerating, now your breath is getting shallow, now your brain is searching for its next lines to be able to get back on track, and we trip out of the gate, and you're playing catch up. It's one of the worst feelings. The only worst feeling is not nailing your closing, finishing stories and statements to wrap things up. So nail your launch line. When my introduction is being read, I'm not listening to the introduction. I know what the person is saying. I'm locking in what's the first words coming out of my mouth. How do I drop into the story? I nail it out of the gate. 3 anchor points. So this is thinking a little bit about just how our movement around the stage. And there's a couple of schools of thought on this. I think Josh is excellent at this. This is something that I've had to work on more. But the idea of 3 anchor points is that as we come out, we want our first anchor point is sort of dead center stage, whatever that environment is that you're on, as close to the audience as you can be that's comfortable if you're up on a higher riser. And we plant. And for those of you who maybe came to our video shoot in Detroit in December, which if you're not familiar with that, one of the challenges so many of us that are trying to break in face is you need a great video in order to get booked. But in order to get the great video, you got to get booked first. It's been the ultimate conundrum for speakers for forever. And we finally solved that in that we actually rent out a beautiful venue. We pack it with extras so there's an actual audience, multiple cameras, and film it in such a way so you've got an unbelievable video. But what I watched is that for many of our students, you've prepared your tail off, but man, you don't anticipate the energy. You get up there, the bright lights hit you, you see the audience, and all the little nervous energy diffusion moments that we do, it's a little tick with our knee, we're rocking our leg, we're side to side. It all happens. And so we've got to train and train and train. We hit our center point and we anchor. We communicate a thought. When we have a moment of pause, in the pause, we move to a second point on the other side of the stage, anchor, and then engage that part of the audience. And oftentimes when I move to that side, I'm not paying attention to the other side of the room. I'm fully engaged with this part of the room in that moment. I'm not going to stay over there, but they're getting my full attention. I complete that thought or that section, pause, in the pause, walk over to the next anchor point, plant, Deliver content there. Now, Josh is a master at that. I probably live somewhere in between. I have maybe a little bit more movement than that, but what I have watched, and I would highly recommend everyone do this, you have to watch game film. What do I mean by game film? I say game film. I played college football. You always had to watching film of yourself, watching film of the competition. Only in watching yourself can you see the things that you don't remember or couldn't acknowledge or recognize in the moment while you're there. In film, I watch it back and I can be like, wow. Like I felt like I had strong energy, but the truth is it was so much movement that it was distracting from my audience. I felt power, felt good for me, but that was probably distracting for them. And so then I can then make an adjustment based on it. Find what's right for you. But like in all of these tips, we call them rules. Master the rule first, and then go back and break it. Go back and mix it up. Master being, you will never be disappointed or sorry for having developed the skill to plant firmly in one place and powerfully deliver a line. And let a moment of silence hit, and then move to the next point. After you master that, you want to move around more? Great. We and us versus you. This is a subtlety, but it's super powerful. I think especially when we're talking about overcoming challenges, setbacks, hardships, mistakes. You need to do this. You need to do that. You've got to figure this out. You've struggled with, and changing that to, we've all struggled with that. We're on the path of transformation. And I would even include I in this. I didn't tell a lot of stories about myself prior to COVID. But COVID, for me, around the conversation of the future of work, it opened up opportunities to have conversations about mental health and well-being. More people want to talk about the idea of people bringing their whole self, bringing a more humane aspect to work. And so to do that is sort of like if I'm going to ask leaders to be able to tap into their own humanity, I have to be able to do that myself. And so speaking from a place of, saying things like one of the things that I really struggled with over the past 24 months was, maintaining relationships with people that I cared about when, I couldn't see them in the real world anymore. One of the things I struggled with during the pandemic was like, I'm around my wife all the time, 24/7, where before I was gone 3 days a week. And that put tension on her, like to the degree and where it feels appropriate based on your content, being able to say where it's been hard for me, I found has been extremely powerful on our content. And then it gives other people an opportunity to raise their hand and say, I felt that too. Fourth of the 5, the fireworks principle. I love this. So you think about, you go to a fireworks show, go back to being a little kid, last time you saw them, maybe you saw them during New Year's. How do a fireworks show typically start? They come out of the gate with a bang, and then we close with the what? The finale. And so we want to think in terms of how do I start? I want to come out of the gate screaming, on fire, guns blazing. That doesn't mean that my energy is frenetic, but it means it is dialed in. I've got a story that captivates, or I hit them with 10 stats specifically about their industry, like Pete Sheehan is so phenomenal at. He'll have done so much research about their industry that he'll come out and in the first 90 seconds clearly communicate he knows their world as well as them, if not in some cases potentially better. He's done their homework. Boom, that's the fireworks out of the gate. And then in closing, making sure that, in clock management, knowing where you're at timing-wise, that you set yourself up with enough time at the end to be able to end with the finale of fireworks. If there's one thing that I've struggled with throughout the years is I want to tell my audiences everything. There's, instead of 5 trends, I think there's 10 things and they have to know them all. And I want to jam them all in and I try to tell them too much. And then I look down, I got caught up in the moment. I look down and I've got 5 minutes to close. And I'm 20 minutes away from a close. And now you're trying to scramble to get to a closing story and leave them on a high note. You want to set yourself up so that your closing story has room to breathe. What do I mean by room to breathe? Meaning, there's no rush. You're so intentional with your movement and diligent with the story that you can let things land. and I'm not in a hurry because I've got 30 seconds and I can see the meeting planner off to the side getting ready for the next speaker to come on. That's a terrible feeling. You can feel a powerful close slipping through your fingers because you weren't diligent and dedicated and disciplined in your clock management throughout the rest of the time. Set yourself up so you have room for your stories to breathe at the end. Fireworks principle. Come out with a bang, close with the finale. And this last one, is a great theme of just, it's a framework to think through, what are the outcomes I want for this audience? Again, you've gone back and you've really understood, like, what is their primary challenge? Where are they at? Where's their current state? Where's their future state? How am I going to help them move through that? But as I look through the content I'm going to be delivering that day, I look through this lens of think, know, do, feel. What do I want this audience to think? Right? What are 2 or 3 things I want them thinking about coming out of this? What do I want them to specifically know that they didn't know? Maybe there's new content that I introduced them to, some new theory or concept. What do I want them to do? Most of the meeting planners and executive sponsors you're going to be working with, a big thing that they say they're going to want is, like, we want actionable content. Yes, I want you to, have them be inspired, have them energized, but give them something practical that they can implement on Monday. Everybody asks for that. And so as you go through that framework, you think and do of, like, what am I going to have them do? What is this audience doing differently coming out of this? Do I have 3 explicit things? If I don't, how do I get clear on that? And then the last one is feel. And I think it speaks to, I forget who wrote it in the chat, but the idea of connecting the head and the heart. Not just speaking from our head, from an analytical standpoint, but being able to drop into your heart space and say, what do I want these people to feel today? And feeling doesn't necessarily always mean I want them to feel seen or cared for, appreciated, recognized. You might want them to feel uncomfortable. Pete is maybe one of the best in the world of, like, making no apologies of, like, I'm going to come and I'm going to make this group feel uncomfortable. But they need to feel uncomfortable in order to move through this moment of change. But he's very intentional about that. That doesn't just happen by accident. He was intentional in the content, in his think, know, do part, leading to how that room ultimately felt coming out of it. So we're coming to the close of our time here. I'm going to give you just a final run through. Again, we're scratching the surface at the level of depth that we go into in our boot camp. We go into the 5 elements of compelling storytelling. So there's storytelling insights here. There's keynote structures. The idea of the James Bond opening, I love when Josh does that. A higher purpose close, those are beautiful strategies of implementing. Keynote mechanics, right? The choreography, vocal range, emotional transfer, gesture, speed, cadence, rhythm, posture, all of those things. Now we're in these virtual environments. How do you control that in this setting? I haven't moved around a whole lot today. I've sort of been here. There's other times where we drop the green screen. I move about the room. Again, how do we hold and captivate an audience? 8 strategies to boost your L factor, your likability factor. For some of you, that might be a real issue. For others, maybe not. Comes pretty natural for you. 10 danger traps, speaker launch plan template, and the master checklist. If there's one thing I heard resoundingly from people coming out of Detroit in conversations afterwards was they felt like they had a real game plan. They're like, I've got the blueprint in front of me. I can see the path now. Now I just need to go to work. I've got answers to the test that I really needed to get me there. So we're coming to the end of our time here, 2 minutes. I'll just open up, and again, I know I think we've got Pete and Josh here too. If anybody has a final question, we've got time for it, or you can absolutely send us a note to follow up. But are there any other questions? Anybody have any other questions? We're good. I don't see any hands. Awesome. Well, then in closing, what I'll say on behalf of the entire team and the partners, we so appreciate you coming and spending some time with us. Our next opportunity to hang, again, March 13th through the 15th in Bonita Springs, Florida. boot camp. We'd love to have you. More information. In fact, let's drop it in the chat, gang. Matt's contact information. If you want a follow-up conversation, you've got questions, you want to learn more, what's going to be covered, costs associated with the travel, all of those good things. Let's put Matt's contact information in there. Reach out to him. He'll be happy to answer any questions. And of course, feel free to reach out to any of us across social media. My contact, I'm at Seth Mattison across all social channels. Anything we can do to help support you continuing to grow, we all rise together. Thanks for a great day, gang. Have a great afternoon. Cheers.